Okay, so good morning, class. For this week, we are going to talk about proving statements on triangle congruence. Okay, before we proceed to that, we are going to have okay. So for this week, let us tackle about proving statements on triangle congruence. So after the recall, so let us have now what we are going to expect. So recall on how to prove two triangles are congruent. Number two is prove statements on triangle congruence. And then the last is apply proving statements in real life situation. Okay, so proving statements on triangle congruence. So let us recall that if two triangles have three corresponding sides and three corresponding angles that are congruent, then they are said to be congruent triangles. The parts of congruent triangles that match are called corresponding parts of congruent triangles. Okay, so in a congruence statements, order matters. Every part should be matched to the other. So for example, we have the triangle YNA, which is congruent to triangle JOB. So the corresponding parts of the congruent triangles are congruent, and that is in short for CPCTC, wherein segment YN is congruent to segment JO, or YN is equal to JO. Segment NA is congruent to OB, or NA is equal to OB. Then, segment YA is congruent to segment JB, or YA is equal to JB. And then, these are the angles, corresponding angles. Angle Y is congruent to angle J, or the measure of angle Y is equal to the measure of angle J. Then, angle N is congruent to angle O, or the measure of angle N is equal to the measure of angle O. Then angle A is congruent to angle B, or the measure of angle A is equal to the measure of angle B. So let us try to prove statements onto or triangle congruence. Okay, so meron silang tinatawag na shared sides, and that is segment OM. Okay, so given OM, which is a bisector of angle SOE. Ito yung SOE. And when we say angle bisector, meaning to say that angle SOM and angle EOM are equal. That is by the definition of angle bisector. Then, we are going to prove that M is the midpoint of SE. So when we say midpoint, we need to say that the SM is equal to EM. Okay? So here is the statements. So OM is a bisector of angle SOE. So that is given. So given yon. Okay? And then angle SOM is congruent to angle EOM. So once again, that is the definition of angle bisector. And angle S is congruent to angle E. So that is given. And then, segment SO is congruent to segment EO. So of course, the reason behind is converse of isosceles triangle theorem. Pag sinabi natin isosceles triangle, two sides are equal in the two triangles. And then, triangle OSM is congruent to triangle OEM by means of ASA postulate or angle side angle, kasi meron na tayo ditong angle, dalawang angle, and then yung side. Okay, so angle side angle postulate. So therefore, that segment SM is congruent to segment EM. That is, corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent, which is CPCTC. So therefore, we can say that M is the midpoint of SE. So that is the by definition of midpoint. Okay? Let us have another example. Segment GL is congruent to segment GN. And then angle GLE is congruent to angle GNO. Okay, so given yon. So angle segment GL is congruent to segment GN. Then angle GLE is congruent to GNO. So we are going to prove that segment LE is congruent to segment NO. Nasaan ba yung LE? Ito yon. Ito yung LE. Then we have O or NO. Ito yon. Okay? So yan. Yun ang ating ipoprove. So once again, LGE or angle LGE is congruent to NGO. Nasaan ba yung LGE? Ito yon. GE, which is congruent to NGO. So that is reflexive property. Okay, so reflexive yon. And then, we have, bakit siya naging reflexive? Kasi itong ating ito kanina, GLE, di ba? Ito yung GLE. GLE. Okay? And then, we have GNO. So, ngayon, binaligtad lang natin. LGE. LGE. So, yung pa rin naman yon, di ba? Yung pa rin yung angle. So, that is reflexive property. Okay? And then, triangle GLE is congruent to triangle GNO. So, that is by the virtue of angle side angle postulate. So, dalawa na yung nakuha nating angle na equal, di ba? At isa yung side. So, therefore, that segment LE is congruent to segment NO. So, corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. CP. Okay? Another example. So, given is segment GB is congruent to NB and angle G is congruent to angle N. So, that is given. And then, we are going to prove that angle I is congruent to angle E. So, ito yung angle I which is congruent daw to angle E. So, let us prove this one. So, angle GBI, ito yung GBI is congruent to NBE. NBE. So, yun. So, vertical angle theorem. So, ito yun. So, meron tayong vertical angle theorem. So, therefore, masasabi natin kung itong angle na to ay equal. So, yung triangle GBI and triangle NBE is also congruent. And that is by the means of angle side angle. So, angle side angle. Okay? So, ASA postulate. So, therefore, we can say that angle I is congruent to angle E. So, CP. Corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. Okay? So, for your activity number 1, so you are going to supply the reason or the blank statements on the given data. Okay, so given OJ bisects angle ROB, so angle ROB and angle RJB. So ito yung ating R. Ito yung R natin. Hindi na pasulat. Okay. ROB and RJB. Okay. So bisect daw yung OJ. So meaning to say that this angle are congruent kung nag-bisect siya. Definition of angle bisector. Okay? So, madali na yan, class. Then, for activity number 2, so keep practicing. So, once again, you are going to supply the given or the blank statements and the reasons. So, given natin ay B is the midpoint of IA. Ito yung IA. Kung siya ay midpoint, ibig sabihin itong side na to ay equal. And angle I is congruent to angle E. So, ito yung angle I, ito yung angle E. Then, you are going to prove that B is the midpoint of GR. So, sasabihin natin, masasabihin dapat natin na ito ay equal din. Okay? So, then, for activity number 3, so, given blank na lahat ang statements at saka yung reason, so kayo na ang bahala to prove that angle 3 is congruent to angle 4. So, how we are going to prove that these two angles are congruent? Okay, so to wrap up, so, two triangles are congruent if their corresponding sides are equal and their corresponding angles are equal also. So, these are the three ways to prove that triangle congruence. The SSS, SAS, and ASA. And when we say CPCTC, These are the corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. And we have going to have the three markings you can add if they aren't marked already. The reflexive property or the shear side, the vertical angles which are congruent, and the alternate interior angles. Okay, so they are also congruent. And then we will have three items post-test. Okay, so to continue our week 6, so hopefully sana nakatulong itong ating munting video para masagatan ninyo ang ating learning task. So that is belong in our written works. Okay? So goodbye class.